Okay, Anna, I'm going to spotlight over to you.
Alrighty, good morning everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue on behalf of Concordia University's Fourth Space. Located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, Fourth Space is activated daily via live events such as this one to create engagement around the various research projects and various initiatives in development across the university. So to that end, it's our pleasure to welcome all of you in here, our special guests, as well as the folks who are joining this workshop. Into this kind of virtual space that we've created. Obviously, normally we would have been in the space all together, sitting around some tables, but thanks for joining us in this way for Music Curation with Lexis from Music is My Sanctuary. So I'll be passing the floor to Francella from CJLO in just a minute to get you situated, but before doing so, bit of word about the Zoomness of this. So we are in a Zoom meeting, which is quite familiar to you all, I'm sure. And it also means that you can, the idea is that it's a workshop that you participate in every way that's available to you. So do feel free to turn on your video and ask questions and pop in and engage in any way that you're comfortable doing so. Lexis will be sharing a screen, so we'll be viewing a slideshow, but of course, once again, you can control that view, so you can kind of move your bar around to see, make it smaller or bigger in your own viewing situation. So get comfortable for that. We will be live streaming to YouTube, and I'll post that link in the chat in just a second as well. And there we'll be controlling the view on active speaker. So feel free to engage. And on that happy note, I'm passing it over to Francella. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Francella. I'm the station manager at CJLO 1690 AM. CJLO is Concordia University's radio station. We have existed since 1998. You can listen to CJLO on 1690 on the AM dial and also by streaming online by going to our website, cjlo.com. We are also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Mixcloud if you'd like to hear our content online. We serve a variety of different needs and interests from our community. We have shows in a variety of different genres. And basically, if you'd like to get involved, if you're a Concordia student or faculty or staff member, but even if you're not affiliated with Concordia at all, there's always a place for you at CJLO. So if you would like to get involved, be sure to visit our website, again, cjlo.com. You can fill out an application, or you can send an email, which is just manager@cjlo.com. We're really happy that Lexis from Music is My Sanctuary is here. So a big part of what we do at CJLO is curating music and having really great and strong music programming. So we thought that working with Music is My Sanctuary would be a natural fit. So thank you so much to Lexis and Fourth Space, and I hope you all enjoy the workshop.
Yes, thank you, Francella. Thanks, CJLO. Thank you for welcoming me. I'm a former Concordia student, so I'm pretty geeked to be here. This is my first time collaborating with Concordia, although I've played on CJLO a couple times. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy it. I hope you can take any concrete tips that will help you in your projects. That's definitely my goal. And feel free, this would have been great to do in person, but as you said, the Zoomness of it all, feel free to raise your hand or interrupt me at some point if there's something that's not clear, or if you want to ask me a question, or you can save your questions at the end. I would love to, any projects that you want to share that, you want my 2 cents or advice on, I'd love to take a crack at it. So I will try and get this started with my screen. Can you see my screen now? Yes. Hold on. Now I'm just trying to move this thing so I can see you. Music curation, and that's me. Whoops. Okay, there you go. My name is Alexi. I've been, I'm a big fan of I collect pictures with records over my face. When people take pictures of me DJing, I'm never a fan of those. So I try to collect pictures of records in front of my face, it seems. So I guess a little bit about me before I share about some of my projects and thoughts on music curating. I come from, I guess, a third generation music family. My dad was a professional musician for 20 years, composed for soundtracks, for theater, played with Charles Lebois on a few records. His father, my grandfather, was an opera composer. So I'm sort of a third generation in music, and I studied music as a kid. But I would say around like 10, 11, 12 years old, I started kind of being more interested in collecting and listening and accumulating music and music knowledge, I guess, more than making it. And, I will go into the kind of duality of the music curator versus an artist. I've never seen myself as an artist. I consider what I do and the various projects that I do artistic, but I don't necessarily consider myself an artist. And, many years ago, I became very comfortable with the fact that my role and my strength is uplifting and championing other people's music. So I don't know if how you feel about that important question. I started Music is My Sanctuary in 2007, so that's a really long time ago, in the glory days of the rise of the independent blogs in those days, in the first wave of podcasting as well, and I'm very proud to say that it's still online and still kicking. And there's been a lot of independent websites over the years that have died down, and it's not a small thing to run a website for 13, 14 years. It's a website that has a good following, built a really good community of different collaborators from Serbia and London and San Francisco, and and I'm proud of that. And I guess I'll show you, as I kind of explain different ways to express music curation, whether it's online radio or podcasts or long form written pieces. Music is My Sanctuary does a lot of those different things. I'll kind of explain to you how I approach it on Music is My Sanctuary. And 24 Hours of Vinyl is an event series that I started in 2011, which is basically, as the name suggests, it's a 24-hour consecutive marathon where all we play is vinyl. And basically that event started in a really, really spontaneous way in my basement, just as a way to beat the winter blues. And what I did is I just invited, I don't know, like 15 or 20 of my DJ record collector friends to just come down with a pile of records as a sort of musical potluck. And since then, I've taken that event to 8 or 9 different cities, and now I do it once a year in Montreal as part of Nuit Blanche. There's a record fair attached to that event as well. So, very proud to have seen it grown from my basement to bigger things. And I work professionally as a music supervisor, mostly in advertising for now, but hopefully more TV series and movies eventually. You can ask me questions about that a little later if you feel like it. I consider my music supervisor job connected to what I do, and I try to bring my passion and my knowledge into it, but I kind of like separate it from my passion projects, being Music is My Sanctuary and 24 Hours of Vinyl. So again, feel free to stop me if I'm speaking too fast, or if I'm not loud enough, too loud, whatever. So I guess a question before I continue would be, well, 20 years in, what is my approach to music curation? And we'll get into that, but I'm not necessarily attached to the word music curation. I know that curation itself is a word that's been overused in absolutely every walk of life. But for the purpose of this conference, and for when I take a step back and look at what I do, I think the term music curator does apply to who I am and does apply to what I do. And yeah, I just want to share to you a few of my principles, I guess. Giles Peterson, I don't know if any of you know who he is. He's basically a radio show host on the BBC and just one of the most influential, radio hosts and DJs in the UK. And I just I just posted this because I remembered that he had sent that tweet. So and for me, Giles Peterson musically has always been my biggest influence growing up. So I remember that was one of the tweets that I kind of framed, which is actually, I should have it framed. But yes, so I wanted to start with, what are the challenges when it comes to creating content and surrounding music and various music curation projects? What are the different challenges? Well, the first challenge is, like, I never thought that I'd say this, because I'm such hungry. I'm a musical omnivore. Like you would have asked me when I was just starting, I couldn't get enough music, and I couldn't get my hands on enough releases. But I really feel, and I'm sure you feel it too, no matter what kind of music you like, and I happen to be someone who likes a lot of different things, the amount of music that's being released is staggering, and it's exponential, and it's actually a problem. It feels strange to say that it's a problem, but it is. Music is different than cinema in the sense that, for example, I don't remember the exact number, but on Netflix, I think that the catalog of titles is around 30K, 20,000, 30,000. That's a lot if you're trying to pick one show, right? On Spotify, I think it's something like around like 80 million, and that was a few years ago. I think every day on Spotify, there's 50,000 songs being uploaded. So all that to say that even if we all love music, which I'm sure that you do, even if we can't get enough, the volume of it it's a real challenge. So it's a challenge for us as curators, but it's also a huge challenge for consumers, right? And I'll get into that a little later, but there's someone who wrote a great book called The Paradox of Choice, which basically studies this idea that if you give people more choice, they end up it ends up leading to less diversity rather than more diversity, right? People become paralyzed, and they end up choosing between the 3 or 4 options that feel safe and feel kind of easy to get into. So that's a big challenge for consumers, for listeners. So another challenge as music curators, radio show hosts, content creators of all kinds, is it's very hard to stand out. So there's more music being released than ever before, but there's more content being created than ever before, and I'm sure you all feel that it's hard to stand out. It's hard to get traction. And we can say what we want. I mean, we'll get into that. I'm not someone who's obsessed by numbers at all. Like I try to not judge my own projects based on how many clicks it got. But at the same time, you do want to feel like you have an impact, like you have traction, right? So that's another thing that's hard. Another thing that's hard is the way that the algorithms work, the content algorithms work is they really funnel people into various filter bubbles of political opinion, and music tastes also. So that's a real thing. Is it's okay if you like Japanese 80s obscure ambient music, sure, okay, great, but then the Spotify algorithm is gonna is gonna overwhelm you with that, and it's not gonna probably not gonna say, hey, maybe there's this new rap record that you'd like, I'm not sure if I'm explaining this pretty well, but I'm sure you're familiar with this concept. I mean, we live with this every day. I mentioned obsession with numbers. As it becomes the numbers for what we do, and the perception for people who consume the content are so present that that sometimes it can be demoralizing. I'm sure you've felt that. Personally, I've created projects that have had incredible numbers, and I've put together projects that have had 200 listens. And you really have to ask yourself, you really always have to stay grounded and remind yourself why you're doing these projects. And I think obsession with numbers is it's a dangerous thing, and it's something I try to not do. Hard to stand out, feeling like everything has been done. That's something I fight too, because I always want my projects to have to feel like there's at least one thing that's original about it, one thing that's kind of never been done. For me, that's always a thrill to say, this specifically, how I did it, how I approached it, no one's ever done this like this, right? That's not to say I'm inventing anything or inventing any format, but at least every time I'm doing something, I feel like it's really truly an expression of my taste or philosophy, right? I'll get into that, but for many reasons, music discovery on streaming platform is completely broken. And I don't mean for people like us. I don't mean for people who are hungry enough and active enough. And most people have a very passive relationship with music. And this gets back to the paradox of choice. Most people are used to turning on the radio and listening to whatever's there. So that extends to Spotify. They log into Spotify and they can, they end up being overwhelmed with information, and they end up being choosing more of the same thing. And there's a lot of stats that really demonstrate how this whole myth of discovery on Spotify and other platforms is sort of it is a myth, right? And again, I'm not talking about people like us. I'm talking about average people. Building a brand for anything, whether you want to be known as a curator, just as whether you're trying to build a brand for yourself or for the project that you're trying to build. For many of the previous reasons, building a brand is difficult. You have to be the payoff of getting traction, getting an audience, building a brand. All of that stuff is you really need a lot of patience. You need patience, and you need to be consistent. And I say consistent doesn't mean that you need to post something every day. It just means that if your concept is a monthly concept, then you need to stick with it for a year or two and three, and then good things might happen. And like the where I got to with the 24 hours of vinyl. At first, I just really did it for fun. I really, I did, and it's a lot of work. It's 24 hours. It's the logistics of booking 15 DJs. It's the sacrifice of I would take my weekends off and I would go to Paris, and then I would take one day off from my job on Monday, and then I would come back and I would be completely exhausted. I didn't make any money. But the project kept building, so patience and consistency is super important. That's sort of repetitive of the previous point. That's and it may seem like a really basic statement to explain, to talk about how the curator and the artist are sometimes overlap, but sometimes not. I don't want to go as far as saying that being an artist that's also a curator is sort of a conflict of interest. I don't want to go that far, but I'm prepared to almost go there. Because for me, that's a choice that I've made. That's a choice that, I studied music as a kid, and I'm not saying this to, I know that I could be making average music, but I don't want to make average music. I would rather spend my time listening to incredible music and elevating it in different ways. That's sort of my philosophy. So basically, I'm very comfortable with not wearing the hat of an artist, but that's not to say that no one can achieve that and the artist cannot be a curator. I'm not necessarily saying that. Yes, I collect punchlines and jokes about curation of closets, curation of book lists, and so on. But we'll get to a little bit later about what I think, why this word in the last 20 years has become more and more overused and misunderstood. So I spoke to you about a few of the challenges facing music curation and content creation in music. I wanted to speak about a few of the different principles that I've kind of acquired over the years. So this is a really simple statement and simple phrase. There's a art curator that I would really recommend. I can send you the link of his name. His name is Hans Ulrich Obrist. He's a Swiss art curator. And I've read a lot of his books, watched a lot of his videos over the years, and he's someone that really inspires me. He's really an art curator. And basically he was explaining that every day he tries to start the day by reminding himself of this phrase. How can I be of use? That's really his philosophy, is to be there for the artist, is to be there for, is to be a champion of the art in which he believes. And I think that's a really important phrase. Building close connections with artists, labels, PR, whatever it is that you specifically do. I think that's super very important, and it follows the first statement. Be a champion for music that you believe in. Build meaning. So we'll get into that, but to me, music curation is much more than just selection, right? It's about building a story around it. It's about building meaning. For example, unfortunately, people have come to perceive, for example, something like a Spotify playlist, Rap Caviar or whatever, they have come to understand that as curated playlists, but that's not how I view curation. Curation is about building meaning and magic and depth around the exchange and around the experience of this discovery. And I don't think a Spotify playlist does that. A Spotify playlist does certain things. It can be of use and you can discover good music, but I'm not prepared to say that it's the full experience of what music curation should be. I was saying add depth, context, magic to the exchange, humanize the exchange. I think we've all become so concentrated on the digital experience that we've forgotten that there's other ways to do that. And if I'm not anti-technology at all, I run a website. But you consistently need to think of ways that you can humanize that exchange, whether it's on the radio or whether it's an event. I was lucky enough to to grow up, one of my first jobs was working in a record store, and that really left a profound influence on me, because I really saw how you can introduce people to a record, and how that entire exchange and dialogue happens in person. And since then, every time that I do a project that's digital based, I try to, it's always in the back of my mind, how do I humanize this exchange? It's not always easy to do, but it's something I always try to keep in mind. Transform that exchange into an experience. That's a big part of what art curation is. It's about creating an experience, right? When you go see an exhibition, it's not only about which art pieces were selected. It's not only about the explanation that goes with each piece. It's about an entire experience, something I guess cohesive, something that really makes sense as an experience. I think this is super important. I feel like being passionate about music, being, for lack of a better word, music nerds. We all have an inner music nerd, and I certainly have it too. Unfortunately, what happens very often with music and liking good music and liking niche music or underground or whatever you want to call it, is it stays very, for the expression, I would say, like inside baseball. Like it stays very kind of closed off, and so basically we get in this loop of trying to impress each other and try to one up each other. And I also call this like cultural flexing, and that to me is not what our role should be. Our role should be about democratizing music and championing artists. So it's really important to remember that. And I think one of the greatest challenges that you can always remind yourself is, when you have a project, don't be afraid to think about the general audience. How could this interest regular people? I did a conference for TED on record digging, and it was a huge challenge into thinking about how can something that we do, a community that I've been a part of for so long, how can this interest ordinary people? And I think after months and months of working on it, at the end, I think I did a good job of explaining what this community is and what is the value of record digging. So basically, what I'm saying here is, whatever project you create, it's okay to have your friends that are into the obscure music that you're into, and it's okay to geek out, but you need to alternate. You need to be able to geek out and also be someone that democratizes music. God, that's a hard word to say. Sorry. Also, don't overthink. That's something that I'm guilty of sometimes, is like, I so want to always do something that has at least one little wrinkle that's different, or feel like it's different, that I'm guilty of overthinking. Like, for example, we'll get into that, but for the life of me, I can't think of something that really motivates me music-wise that I want to do on Instagram. I think about it, and the more I think about it, the more it becomes kind of like super complex, and these super complex things that sometimes, just being spontaneous and just doing content from the heart can be completely fine. Like, it doesn't, you don't always have to do something that no one in the world's ever done, as long as you add your own personality to it. Drawing inspiration from other sources, I think is really important. I just wrote one example here. There's a movie platform called Mubi, and I don't know why it came to mind, but it's a big inspiration for me, because they're really, first of all, they have a really interesting model. So whereas Netflix showcases 40,000 titles. They showcase mostly, I mean, they're now doing a bit more, but they used to have, their format used to be, at any given time, there's 30 movies on the platform. And every day there's a new one, and every day there's one, every day there's one that comes on and one that comes off. So at any given time, there's 30 movies. So already the process of selection is super precise and super interesting. You're showing me 30 pieces. That means that it feels like everything has a raison d'être and everything has a purpose, right? And then the way that they present that, the way that they write, the writing in which they present those movies is always super sharp and super precise. So that's always been an inspiration into saying something like, I wish I could do something like that. You know, maybe on Music is My Sanctuary, instead of having now, because after 12 years, I now have like 7,000 posts on Music is My Sanctuary. It's too much, right? I'm not doing a good job of taking people by the hand and saying, you know, you want to listen to a mix? Okay, great. Do you like Brazilian music? Okay, great. Here's this. I'm not doing a good job of that because there's just too much of everything, right? So Mubi is a good example for that. So yeah, the point is, you know, draw inspiration from other industries, other mediums. To me, a big thing about music curation and content creation, and probably comes from the fact that, you know, I love DJing. I will always be a DJ. That's kind of my main means of expression. And to me, the way I approach DJing is really about making junctions and making sort of collisions between ideas and artists and movements and eras that were never connected before. That's something that always excites me, like connecting two songs that you feel like probably no one's ever connected them in that way, is something that, and I think that can extend to organizing events, doing podcasts. That's a philosophy that's a principle that can be applied to so many different ideas. I think getting back to this obsession with numbers, I think as content creators, it's super important that you kind of make a choice between, am I chasing numbers? Am I chasing size? Or am I chasing depth? I think that's a really, I don't, you know, whenever I go on YouTube and I clearly see people who are creating for the algorithm, I don't knock that. I'm not against that. That's completely fine. That's just not my thing. And I think you have to make a choice between the two. You know, are you chasing clicks, and are you optimizing your content for the algorithm? Are you really creating for the algorithm? If you are, completely fine. I mean, if you can make a good living creating content and monetizing it, I'm not knocking that at all. I'm just saying there's, you know, there's probably a way to balance both, but anyway, I'm sure you understand my point. This gets back to building close connections with artists, but, you know, have a lot of discussions with artists, be close to them and help them tell their story. I think that's important. And within all of that, when I was saying humanize the exchange, within all of that, inject your own taste, inject your own style. The human touch is what beats the algorithm, right? For example, that's where radio, the presence of the host on a radio show still beats a Spotify playlist any day of the week, right? The person that gets attached to your personality, to your voice, to your presence, that's unbeatable. That person will create an intimate connection with you, which is not something that Spotify can do, or at least yet. Yeah, and also just, I guess that's another principle of Hans Ulrich Obrist, is that curation follows art and not the other way around. It's basically to, I don't know, it's my philosophy to always stand, to never elevate myself above the music itself. I know it sounds corny, but I'm there to elevate the artist and to elevate the music. And I'm not saying that my role is not important, but it's certainly not more important than the music. You have any questions so far, just while I take a sip of water?
I have some questions, but I don't know if we want to save them for the end because
Sure.
it's a lot of like wrap up stuff. But maybe one question I have is just, I know we were talking once about being in a post-discovery age because we have access to all the music ever just with our fingertips. So I wonder, how does that impact music curation and music discovery?
Yeah, I think we were saying, I think we still live very much in a discovery world and discovery age or what have you. I think we were saying that we live in a post-rare world where everything is now, so, you know, getting back to my background as a vinyl collector, and a lot of the vinyl culture has always been about finding the obscure treasure and finding the thing that no one knows about. And I think that extends for sure to hosting a radio show, to just being, so I guess, you know, all of us who are like really into really precise music and we know what we like, well, part of our pride is doing something that no one else is doing. So kind of like there's always a little bit of one-upsmanship. But this notion of rare is something that was completely something that was real even 10 years ago. You know, I remember I would buy magazines and it had charts in it, and I would always love trying to hunt down those records, and it took me months and months, and I probably only found half of them. Now these days, like, you can play an obscure Nigerian boogie record and within 2 seconds you can Shazam it. Within 3 seconds you're on Discogs. Next week the record is in my doorstep. Or I can look for an obscure Japanese record made for plants on YouTube, and it has 23 million views. You know what I mean? Like nothing. I really think as people who like really precise music, this notion of secrecy, what's the word I'm looking for, being secretive and being kind of like obsessed with rarity of records, I think that doesn't exist anymore. You know, everything is in the open, everything is out there, everything is one click away. So as curators, it becomes about how do you present it, about how do you inject your personal style, how do you build meaning around it, how do you, okay, yeah, you like that record and you've discovered that record, can you do a deep dive and find the story around the artist? How was that record made? How can you present it in an interesting way? So I really think that's where I see this going, because all this music is it's all available, and it's great that it's available. I think our role is to build an experience around it, right? So I just wanted to share this slide. We'll start getting into more like application examples of curation, but I just wanted to kind of share one slide about, you know, when I was saying that, you know, the word curation over the last few years or in our lifetime has been used and overused exponentially, and I think we all know that basically the reason that is because that word and that action of filtering or selecting is so important, just because of the volume of information and input of stimuli that we have, that algorithms or curation, whether it's human or any sort of filtering, basically is fundamental to our day, because we just can't consume everything that there is, right? So but unfortunately, the overuse of that word has kind of like told people that curation is basically selection, right? That's how most people understand what curation is. It's selection, right? Getting back to the playlist on Rap Caviar, the Rap Caviar playlist on Spotify. Is that curation? I mean, it's to me, it's 1/4 of what curation is, and that's what I wanted to talk about. It's selection, right? And a great music curation project should have the 4 pieces that I'm about to show you. And I'm not inventing this. This is basically the word curation. As I'm not sure if you were aware of the historical perspective of that word, but it's basically it means caretaker, right? The word curator, I think, was started with the first caretakers were, I believe, in Rome, and they were basically their job was to be caretakers of artifacts and important documents, and that's where the word originates. And eventually, the word caretaker started being applied to more an art context. So that word became more of a caretaker, a selector of art, right? That would be the person that would be schooled in art to say this piece is worthy of to be esteemed, or reputation, or whatever. And then eventually, even after that, the curator also became the producer of the exhibition, right? So that's really how the word evolved. So selection is what we've become, is what the word has come to be focused on in modern ways, is selection. Amazon curated book list, curated people who curate your closet, things like that. But really, curation is about selection. It's always been about preservation. It's always been also about contributing to the subject, right? Whatever the subject is some sort of a scholar contribution to the history or to the subject. And as I was saying, the art world really transformed that word into also a presenter of the content of the exhibition. So really, to me, those are really the 4 pillars of what curation as a whole really is. And then I just whipped up this graph last night, so hopefully it makes sense. But I was thinking also, okay, these are the 4 pillars. These are the 4 basic important principles, and what's internal to you, how you add to that. Is you add your personal touch, you add your taste, you add your style, you add your own philosophy to that. And what is external to that is basically, okay, these are the 4 principles. This is what I want to do. This is the music that I'm into. This is the style of writing or hosting or whatever that I have. Well, what is external to this? Where is this going to exist? Like, what different platforms is this going to exist? In which context? What type of audience will this be? So I don't know. We can get back to this slide eventually later if you want, but that's just something I was, I think, I don't know. To me, I think this represents curation as a whole. So just one more point about this notion of preservation. I think it's just human nature to be to overlook the importance when we're in a given time. We overlook the importance of preservation. Where I'm going with this is, well, this example that I'm showing you with Tom from MySpace upside down. This to me was a super, super interesting story that really proved the point that music preservation in the digital age is something that is important and something that has value, yet is completely always overlooked. So I don't know if you knew, but 2 years ago, MySpace did one wrong manipulation in their servers, and they basically lost 10 years. Basically, they lost all of their music files, right? And it's easy to chuckle at that because MySpace is sort of a punching bag and MySpace. But MySpace really started as a music platform, and there's tons of amazing music on there, right? So basically with one click, MySpace lost 15 years worth of, like, I don't know, 5 million audio files. And so there were treasures in there, and that's music that we'll never hear again. That's maybe that's an incredible artist that no one really knew about, or was before their time or whatever, but there's something genius that was on there and it's lost forever. So that's why when I get back to this full view of what music curation is, preservation to me is super important. Getting back to music is my sanctuary. Well, it's something that, I've been running the thing for 13 years. So I have to pay my bills, and I have to update the server, and I have to do backups, and that's being, in my view, that's being a caretaker of this content. Whoops, sorry. Yeah, so MySpace. So I don't know what time it is. Whoa, I've been taking a lot of time. This is Henri Pierre Noel. This, when I say how can I be of use, that's an artist that I develop a really close relationship with, who passed away a couple of years ago. So shout out to Henri. I don't think I'm going to have too much time to go into the mixtape for aliens, but I can get through it quickly. I'm just going to have a sip of water. So I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, or if you know the story, but to me, the greatest music curation project that I can think of, not to say that it's the only one, but the greatest project that I can think of is a mixtape for aliens. And I don't know if you know the story, but this is the story of the Golden Record. And if you don't know the full story of this, I would really encourage you. I think there's a few documentaries and a few books about this. But basically, NASA sent out two capsules, two Voyagers, Voyager 1 and 2, I guess. And on Voyager 1, there's some sort of plaque. I forget what it is on it, but on Voyager 2, they decided to install on the side of the space capsule a record. And on the record, which is covered in copper so that it can survive space travel. So this is what you're looking at, is the man-made object that's traveled the furthest away. So it's the one object that man has created that's the furthest away from the Earth. So first of all, it's a fascinating story. Second of all, what they decided to do with that project is they decided to encode in the record images and music, so that, if people would find it, they would have a way of getting to, this is what we're about. We're sending a music and pictures and into the universe so that people can know what we're about. So it had to survive the travel, of course. It's a beautiful, beautiful object. But getting back to this idea of selection, right, which we've talked about in a modern way, but this is 1968, 1969. What's incredible about this is there's only, I think there's 90 minutes of music on it. So think about it. If you were to handpick what 90 minutes of music could best represent planet Earth, what would it be? So I think it's just a wonderful, first, the aesthetic, it's beautiful, the preservation, the science behind it of how this record can survive space travel is super interesting. There's also, you see on this record here, on this image here, that's a diagram on how the aliens can put this turntable together and listen to this music. So it's a fascinating story. But to me, as music lovers and that we all are here, I think it's super interesting to say, okay, me as a music curator, what 90 minutes would I put on this record? So that's to me, it's a great project that getting back to the four pillars of what what curation is about. To me, this just checks all the boxes. So I would encourage you, go check out the documentaries on this if you don't know the story about this. Maybe just another music curation project that really comes to mind is the anthology of American folk music that came out on Folkways. I believe this probably came out in the 40s or something like that. And this was basically the first, essentially, this was the first compilation. This was the first mixtape. This was the first playlist, if you think about it. And also, this was the very first archival project. So Harry Smith, who you see his name here, first of all, he was a record collector. So all of the music that's on there came sourced from his collection. And back in those days, no one, I was going to say a bad word, no one gave a damn about record collecting, right? It's not something that cultural institutions really cared to protect. These field recordings, these folk songs, these prison songs, these early blues songs. No one cared to protect those. So first of all, he did the trouble of, he did the work of preserving that music, right? He did the work of selecting that music. And it was the very first time that someone really was a junction maker of putting different ideas together and presenting it as a whole, right? So it's really the first compilation, the first of its kind. And many musicians like Bob Dylan have said that this single piece of this release, this project was, without that release, there is no Bob Dylan, right? He said that, so I'm not saying that. I'm not an expert in Bob Dylan. So that to me is another incredible example of music curation from top to bottom. Feel free at the end if you have any questions on that. So now we finally get to a point where maybe what I wanted to say is, now that we've talked about a few of my principles, now that we've talked about a little bit of the soft theory behind music curation, we've talked about some of the challenges. Well, what I wanted to do is take a few different ways to how can we explore that concept into a few different mediums in content creation, and share some examples of mine, and share some examples that I find influential or inspiring to me, at least. So web content, first of all, I can maybe just share a few. There's a million great examples, but maybe just a few that I wanted to share. Can you still see my screen, my full screen? Yes. Okay. I can start with one of mine. Basically, crucial material is something that I started, that unfortunately I've had to, it's on pause for now, but I'm really happy and proud with this format. It's basically I would call it a sort of record rundown, in the sense that what we used to do as a team on Music is My Sanctuary is every Friday we would comb through the different releases, and we would curate it, select it, present it in a very concise and short, succinct way. And basically the idea was that, if you take, I have super eclectic taste, I can cover a pretty broad range of things, but once you start putting a few different music heads together, and if you do a best of that, then you can really get something incredible. And what I would always challenge the writers is to keep the writing super short, right? Because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to provide a weekly guide for people who are, let's say, pretty engaged with music, people who are pretty hungry. So this is not necessarily for general people, but for people who are pretty passionate about discovering new music. Basically, I want to provide them a guide, and to tell them in 10 minutes, they'd be like, they would be caught up. And basically in jazz, this is what these 3-4 records are what you need. And I would always challenge the writers in keeping this super, super short. And I'll show you an example, but my inspiration for that, not to say that I'm the first to come up with short reviews, certainly not, but my inspiration behind that is, I don't know if you've ever been in a record store where not a ton of stores do that in Montreal, but it's very kind of like a UK thing. You go in the record store and they usually put like a little, I don't know, like a little cardboard paper on the record sleeve, and in marker, you would have like, you know, the staff that would see like, oh, this is for fans of this and this. It's like, and then they would write like something witty or something, some sort of a either like a cool comment to. And then for me, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, when I go into a record store and I see a comment like that piques my interest, I'm 100% like I have to listen to the record, right? So that's really what I tried to do. What I tried to always tell the writers is like, write me something that would fit on a little card, on a little sticker on the record, you know. And my friend Diletta was always the best at keeping it as fun, colorful, meticulously syncopated hip shakers that you won't forget. Tip, right? So that to me, like I want to listen to that, you know. So it's not just about the fact that it's super short, but it's super well selected, and the selection part of it is killer, and it's super, super cutting edge. But the writing is also very, very precise and to the point. So this is just one example of something that I've done on Music is My Sanctuary, but it just came to mind. Hold on, I'm trying to move this. Sorry, I'm playing around with the Zoom options. I'll be back. Okay, so this is one example. There's this website. I'm sure that you're familiar with the platform WeTransfer. So WeTransfer is a pretty basic file sharing, right? It should be a pretty faceless, brandless file sharing platform, but it's not. They have a platform called WePresent, and they create content on this. And they really focus on different art mediums and music, and the look of everything, the subjects themselves, the writing, the presentation, to me is just one of the best examples. Something that is really, really an inspiration for me, and something to strive for. Another example is Bandcamp. I think Bandcamp in this world of shitty tech giant companies like Spotify, Bandcamp is really a force for good. But they've really gone above and beyond that. It's not about just, oh yeah, it's a platform that's fair for artists. Okay, yeah, fair enough. But they've done a really, really good job of over the years creating content that's, you know, that's really, really, you know, some of the best in the world. So I'm sure you know about Bandcamp, but you know, everything, the illustrations and you know, the Bandcamp Weekly is, you know, everything about Bandcamp is great. Another example that really came to mind, and again, talking about the full scope of Curation, there's this website, no one really knows about it. It used to be one of the ugliest websites in the world, but it's this person in Calgary that started this thing called the Museum of Canadian Music. And I think I discovered him on Discogs because I was looking for a record. But then I found out that he had a website. And on this website, this person is dedicated to only one thing, which is Canadian music. And quite obscure Canadian music. And basically I should have stayed on there, but basically, you know, the audio clips are incredible. There's great information on each record. So that to me is a even if it's not the sexiest looking website, that to me is a goldmine of information. And that's an example of someone who set out to do one thing and is doing it extremely well. And I'm sure this site doesn't do great numbers, but the cultural impact and the importance of that website is, I should write to the person just to say thank you, but yeah, so that's an inspiration for sure. Speaking of another website that's really not the sexiest looking website, but archive.org has a really amazing mandate, which was, when I was talking to you about preservation in the digital age, that's really what they do. I forget I heard in an interview that basically it was like some sort of a crazy stat that basically a web page stays intact for like, I don't want to give you the number exactly because I don't remember, but basically just this notion that content on the internet breaks all the time. Servers go down, files go missing. There's so much of that I mean, MySpace is a good example. So archive.org it's a nonprofit, and that's all they do. They archive the internet and they archive content, and they have an audio section that's actually quite great. I mean, the layout and the presentation of it is pretty shitty, but why can't I go there? Is kind of so, but the mandate and the mission and the philosophy and the content itself is fantastic. It's incredible. So that's, archive.org is definitely a company I would work for. I really respect what they do. Okay, going back to this, sorry. Web content. DJ mixes, we could say DJ mixes, whether it comes out on SoundCloud or it exists on the radio. Of course, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is really kind of like my means of expression. I love welcoming journalists and people whose means of expression is writing, but for me, it's not really my thing. My really focus is radio and DJ mixes. That's really what I enjoy the most. Yeah, I guess what I can say, how do I build meaning and storytelling around creating some form of a DJ session? I can give you a few examples. Each spring we all live the harsh Montreal winter, and spring is hard earned and sacred for us. So I started 8 years ago, I started this kind of 2-hour mix every year that's based around this idea of spiritual music, not necessarily spiritual in religious terms, but spiritual in kind of feeling. And it's something that I've done for 8 years. And, I can send you the link after, but it's, to me as a DJ, even though these mixes are not, they're not like dance floor mixes at all, they're more listening mixes. But to me, this is probably the thing that I've done as a DJ that I'm the most proud of. I can, another couple little things that I can show. One thing that I was really proud to do was collaborate with Wax Poetics in doing a mix focused on Soviet music. So I was in Estonia the last 2 years, and I started really going into the wormhole of ex-Soviet music. So everything that basically it was released on Melodia. Melodia, it was the only record label in USSR. So every single Russian Republic, every single one record label only for like 60 years worth of music. So it's pretty insane. So I did this mix. Unfortunately I can't show you the article because there's a paywall, but I really did a pretty cool job of, I guess, documenting those records that I found, in Estonia, and took me years to kind of accumulate and start understanding the background stories around the records. And so on the website Wax Poetics, there's like a cool thing. So for me, it checks the boxes of, yes, it's well selected, yes, it's a cool mix and it's a cool listen, but there's there's all this meat around it. There's a story around it. There's visual presentation around it. So that, I guess, is a good example. Sorry, keynote. But yeah, I'm super passionate about DJ mixes. I'm really I don't know. I'm super passionate about other people's DJ mixes as well. Events. So I think I don't know which of you organize events these days. It's a bit difficult, but you know, getting back to this, to my project of 24 Hours of Vinyl. Again, I think it's what I try to strive for is to create something that has a sense of direction, to create meaning, to create, in addition to selecting, because again, curating the event to me goes far beyond just selecting who's playing there. It's about if I book certain people, I'm going to have a website and I'm going to tell a story about each person and I'm going to present it. And then once I host the event, how can I build meaning and magic around the experience? So that, to me, the music curation, the whole philosophy does go into when I organize events. You know, I put one example that comes to mind is the moonshine parties that you see here on the right, and that you see on the top here. It's this great party called Okela. It's a party in Verdun, in like a parking lot, like a multi-level parking lot, and they book like the gnarliest, like avant-garde free jazz type shit. You go there with an open mind, and you know. And you get blown away, and the experience itself in being like in a parking lot, it's just something very unique, and everything is super well thought of, I guess, is an example that came to mind. Radio and streams, I've always been super, I mean, there would be hundreds of examples of good radio, but I just put a few that kind of came to mind. I grew up with Radio Nova, which is a radio station in Paris, which has always been such an influence, and Giles Peterson on the BBC, and college radio as well. I think the challenge for college radio, and I'm not the thing that's difficult with college radio is you have all of these great shows, but sometimes the totality of the experience, it's hard to, it becomes very hit and miss, you know, it becomes very, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of a listener. That's why I mean hit and miss, in the sense that, you know, I'll turn the radio station on and something will really, really resonate with me, and then the show right after might not, right? So that's what I've always found the difficulty with college radio. You know, and then what stations like NTS and red light radio and antennas, and I think a lot of those stations have brought tremendous good for radio. But getting back to one of my points when I was discussing challenges, is the fact that it's just added to the volume and added to this you know, there's just so much content out there, and where there used to be 5 good online radio stations like Dublab and NTS, well, now there's 500, right? So that's a real challenge, right? I guess the only last thing that I could say about what I'm doing regarding radio is I started a monthly radio show on Radio-Canada, which was a huge challenge for me. First of all, because I'm not used to hosting anything in French, even though I am French. I'm more comfortable in speaking about music in English, and just everything sounds cooler in English than in French. In French, everything's, you know, you got to say 15 words to say 2 words in English. So, but it's a super, super cool challenge, because I have huge restrictions on what I can and can't play. I have to play 50% Canadian music. There's huge restrictions on the amount of Anglophone music that I can play, because the mandate of Radio-Canada in French is to promote Francophone language and other languages too, but there's already the CBC to play Anglophone music. So it was a huge challenge, but I can, send in the show notes, I can send you my first episode. I was pretty happy with it. But I love radio. Funny enough is that I started my DJ career on this I believe the very first internet radio station in Montreal, which we used to call Sweet Ting, Ting, and it used to be run out of RCA Victor, and that's what's really funny about that experience is that was like in 2001, and when I think of it, it's basically we're doing the exact same thing now. We used to have this webcam, but the webcam was so bad in those days that it would take one picture every 10 seconds or something like that. So the frame would refresh every 10 seconds. And instead of a live chat, we would encourage listeners, well, the 20 listeners, to go on MSN Messenger. So it's kind of like the same thing that a lot of these online radio stations are doing. But at the time, it felt like, revolutionary. Newsletters, I think, as content creators, if the written word is your main means of expression, newsletters are an amazing way to connect with people. One, and two, there's really this momentum of like people just being fed up with Facebook and just fed up with social media in general. So if you're able to, as a content creator, curator, if you're able to build like a list of 100, 200 listeners or fans, or however you call them, your audience, you can really build a really strong relationship that has a lot of depth. You can ask for feedback, you can make changes. So for me, newsletters is not something I do necessarily well, but it's something that I find super interesting. Like if I was doing a newsletter, unfortunately, it would probably be something that's pointing you more towards like either a mix or like, so for me, articles is not really my means of expression, but yeah. So magazines and books, I mean, as a music curator, I'm sure you if you're into music and whatever subject whatever genre of music you're into, I'm sure I'm not going to convince you to start reading reference books and reference guides and stuff like that. But that's certainly something that I do a ton of. I'm especially obsessed with Japanese reference books. I have like a lot of them. They're basically all in Japanese, but most of the key information, like the record label and the key songs and which it's written in English, but the Japanese are really hardcore about vinyl culture and about like I guess music information and about so I really love those books. They're called disc guides, and any genre of music, whether you like industrial music or psychedelic folk or whatever, there's a little almanac on each. And I know it's going to sound funny, but it feels like, you're getting the secrets of someone who's collected in this genre for 60 years, and you have the Bible, for that genre. And so I'm really obsessed by them. I have about like 30 of them, and it's just like sometimes when I read these books, I wish I could, just listen to everything at once, but it's just I guess overwhelming. Record stores are an incredible space of music curation. What people, yes, the human exchange of the store clerk or the store staff getting to know the clients, getting to know, oh yeah, I have something you'd like, and that relationship to me is sacred. I've discovered so many life-changing records directly from staff, right, who kind of like know what I'm into. And that's something, maybe I would have landed on that song on the YouTube algorithm or whatever, but there wouldn't have been the magic of the exchange, the magic of like, hey, if you're into this, you should listen to that. And the drummer from this is on this. All of that additional information and additional context is really what makes for a more meaningful and really like lasting. You can, like, I can go in my record collection and every record I can pull out, I can remember how I got it, who recommended it to me, which is not the same. Like, I've got tons and tons of playlists on Spotify. I don't remember how I discovered that specific song. Like, there's no story around it. I just landed on it, and because the algorithm told me to. The other thing that people maybe don't think of when it comes to record stores and why it's a great music curation space is that when you run a record store, you can't stock everything. You have to make choices of what goes into the wall, because you're paying out of pocket. You're paying to stock those records. So you need to believe in those records, and you need to push them. And that's something, getting back to this idea of less is more, a record store is a fantastic place for that. I love a record store that you can do the entire store in 2 hours, where it feels like everything has a reason for being there, which is not something that you can ever say about Spotify. You can never ever get to the end of Spotify. The one that you see at the top is called Sounds of the Universe. It's a shop in London that I really, really love. The one that you see at the bottom is Hard Wax. It's in Berlin, another shop that I really like. This little guy here that you see is Boomcat. Boomcat is one of my favorite online stores. This store here is a store in Estonia that's become sort of my go-to for Soviet records. This is the owner of that store in Estonia, and he's like a really a protector and a historian of Soviet music. So when I was telling you about this notion of preservation, to me, he's a guy, and his space is a space that embodies all the facets of music curation, selection, preservation, presentation, contribution. So of course, record labels as well are a thing, are very, very often something that they come with. I mean, the greatest record labels out there are record labels that you can feel the direction from release to release. There's an ethos, there's a look, there's really a sound that comes with it. The example that you see here, I don't know if you see my mouse, but the black framed record is a record label in Chicago called International Anthem, and it's a jazz and sort of avant-garde record label in Chicago. And the music itself is always daring and urgent and incredible. The look of it is always great. There's always a little text to kind of like draw you into the world. So that to me is a great curated record label, right?
Hey, Lexi, I just wanted to jump in just to give you a quick time check, just to make sure you have time to get through some questions and engagement with the folks here. So
I'm done in like 5 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Playlists. I adore playlists. It's something I do it on Spotify. I try and find a way to at least break one rule of the game, to at least do something. Like, for example, I'll show you. I mean, it's silly, but like on Spotify, I'd rather instead of doing playlists that are so focused on like, hey, here's the new current rap, here's the best of so and so artists. There's a million of those. There's no way of doing that with any level of originality. So what I do is I do these really silly kind of they're kind of useless, but they're interesting to me. So like the one I'm most proud of is I have a long running collection that is basically every time I hear a song that has crickets in the background, I add it to this playlist. So I have hopefully the largest cricket based playlist in the world. So it's silly, but it's just like something that to me is interesting. Like so this is like a playlist of all my favorite songs that are under 120 seconds. So that to me is just like an interesting way. All the songs I love about phones. So it's not, I mean, I'm not saying that it has any potential of massive to attract massive numbers, but to me it's funny. To me it keeps me going, and it's something I feel at least is different. So that's my philosophy around playlists. But there used to be this website used to be online, and this other website used to be online as well, 22 tracks, and this was one of Boomcat's projects, and both are extinct. Both don't exist anymore. Both, you can't find them, so that gets back to this idea of preservation in the digital age. It's something that we overlook, but think about all the content, think about all the video that you'd like to find that was 8 years ago that you can't find anymore, so that's important. Also, artistic collaborations, that's something that I really, really love doing. I love collaborating with like different institutions whenever it's possible to organize projects, and whenever it is possible to present artists. Like, for example, the picture that you see here is a Montreal musician, Justin Wright, and I presented a show last year in the Biosphere, and I kind of I curated the lineup and build some sort of an experience around that. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it short, but yeah, so I love collaborating with larger institutions, and I think as music curators, I think you have to get good at selling your ideas, and kind of convincing the powers that be to trust you to put these experiences together. Like, one thing that I've always been super bad at is writing like grant proposals and getting money from Canadian Council of Arts and stuff like that. That's something I wish over the years that I would have done better, because I've never submitted anything to anyone, basically. But at least I'm good at going and knocking on the door of FI, knocking on the door of Musée des Beaux-Arts to kind of like convince them to organize something together. But and podcasts, I guess I'll skip the rest, but we can, if you I'll kind of wrap it up, and if you're specifically interested in those last two. Oh wow, I even have this other section that I didn't do at all. Sorry, I prepared too much content, so I'm just going to finish it here. And this was basically, I'm talking about the state of music discovery on Spotify, and basically there's a lot of studies like this. I'll talk about one stat that really blew me away that came out last week, which basically says that 70% of the mass audience in the US right now, right, which is the biggest market for music, 70% of total music, and I'm not just saying you, me, general audience, or younger or older, whatever, 70% of the general audience listens to old music. So 70% of of what is being listened to is catalog, which is incredible. It's like if you would tell me that 70% of what's being watched in terms of movies or box office or whatever is old movies, right? I'm not saying I don't like old music, but it's pretty worrying to see that 70% of what is listened to is catalog. And then there's a couple like other really, really worrying data points that really do show that basically the top 1% of artists really get the incredible majority of revenues and plays. So this kind of music discovery myth on Spotify. I think actually music discovery on Spotify does a pretty good job for people like us, for people who are pretty engaged and pretty advanced and pretty savvy with music discovery. Where it doesn't do a good job is for the average people who just want to listen to hits. Well, they kind of land on the platform and they're overwhelmed and they just fly to safety and they just end up like either listening to something they've listened to a million times or Drake, or Adele, basically. So I really see it as, when I was saying that we like one of our challenges and is to democratize music. And how do we reach those people? How do we reach people who only listen to Adele, right? That's something that I try to keep in the back of my mind, So paradox of choice, trapped in the filter bubble, and limited screen space. This is basically one example, just to say, like, that's usually how I explain it. Another reason why it's such a challenge to discover new music on a device is that the device is so small that there's only room for 3 or 4 album covers. There's only room for 3 or 4 covers. So, when that average when we imagine that average person who only listens to the same 5 records over and over, when she or he opens her app and all she sees is Ed Sheeran, Adele, and Drake, do you really think she's going to go and look for a Gal Costa record or look for she's not going to go beyond that. She's going to pick one of the 4 things that fit in the screen. And one of the 4 things that fit in the screen is hits. And that's it, So if you compare that experience with, like, for example, when you go into a record store, you compare to your field of vision, right? Your field of vision being the screen. You walk into a record store, in your field of vision, you see 5,000 titles, right? So you can go left and right and you can explore, but I really don't think that, I basically think that Spotify discovery for general people is sort of a myth and is sort of broken, but that means that there's a huge value for us and value for and importance for what we do, both for artists who want to be heard and both for listeners who want to discover good stuff, right? So that's it. I'm done. Thank you. You can, I can't hear the unmute, but questions, anything?
Do we put our hand up? How do we ask questions?
Just like what you're doing it.
Hi, Alexis. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you speaking.
Thank you.
It's really insightful, and you're like really honest and humble, and it's really nice because you really elevate the music. So it kind of also, as a music curator, music caregiver myself, it's kind of like re-inspiring. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess I have a couple of questions about inspiration, if I may. There's for example, if you're asked to do a mix for someone, whatever I guess their theme is, or if it's just whatever you want, carte blanche for their radio show or whatever, how do you get inspired to do a mix for someone, for one? I guess I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Well, we can start with that and then like let people talk.
Well, like, for example, like Radio-Canada is a good example. I'm always comparing Radio-Canada or CBC to the BBC, right? I'm always like, I wish there was someone like Giles Peterson on CBC, but then I always forget, because I don't have any restrictions when it comes to Canadian content. I'm sure some of you have, but I'm not used to having those restrictions. So when they briefed me on the phone, first I was super excited, and then second of all, like, I was like, oh wow, okay, 50% Canadian and 4 Anglophone songs in 2 hours. I was like, whoa, how am I going to do me in that format? And then it took me weeks to kind of like to think of a format that a little bit of old, a little bit of new, a little bit of accessible stuff, a little bit of kind of like pretty cutting edge, daring stuff, and to kind of like put that together in a kind of cohesive, kind of not logical way. But then to answer your other question is like, yeah, I absolutely do think of what is the context. Well, first of all, my show is on a Friday 10 to midnight. Okay, well, that's different than Tuesday afternoon, right? So that's for sure, that's plays a role. And then I'm very much thinking of like, oh, okay, well, who listens to Radio Canada? Who is the person? Who is like, who am I speaking to? You know, so yeah, I it's like for me, DJing is like whether it's in a club or whether it's in on a radio show, it's always been about like meeting people halfway. And so like it's not. Yes, I'm only going to play music I like. I will never play one song that I only think is a 6 out of 10. Never, ever, you know, but I like so much different music that I'll find what we have in common, right? I'm not going to free jazz it if I feel like we need to, you know, start there, you know, but yeah. So I mean, I love, yeah, I love collaborating with people and I love thinking about what is the context, where does this thing live, right? So.
I had a question. First off, thank you so much for this. This was really fascinating. I think everybody, at least everybody from CJLO I know, was super into it and will hopefully apply all these things. But we frequently at CJLO do genre weeks or genre celebrations. We have one coming up in March, which is just about metal music. And we encourage everyone to play metal music or loud music. So how do you start to go outside of your comfort zone when you're trying to make a mix of music that maybe you don't have as much familiarity with?
I mean, I guess it's different for everyone. I mean, I really respect people who are uber specialists of one thing. I think has tremendous value, and I always get a kick out of people who are just like who have incredible knowledge of one precise thing. For me, that's never difficult because I'm interested by everything. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I always used to say when I was growing, well, even like 10 years ago, I always felt like, like folk is not something that does it for me. Like it's never really something that really, and then I kind of like started discovering one thing or another, and then like slightly more soul folk, okay, or psychedelic folk, or this, that, and now I'm fully into the wormhole, and I'm sure metal would be the same thing. Like I know pretty much nothing about metal, but if someone came to me and said that to me, I would be like, for sure there's stuff out there. And it's like, I guess the job of the curator and what makes each of us unique is like I would put you in front of 100 songs or 100 records, and you would pick, if I asked you to pick 10, you would pick 10 that different than mine, right? So that's where we're all a bit unique. And you know, we need to wrap that up with like some sort of a personal human touch of how you host and how you put it together. And but yeah, I'm super interested in like, there's not really one style of music, and that's another thing in my job. Like when I do research for music supervision, I'm asked to do like the most ridiculous music research. Like sometimes I have to search for medieval battle music for an ad, you know. So it's like, so I just love music research in general. I know it's something that I could never, and that's probably why I've never gotten around to making any music, because I seem to be obsessed by just like this. I don't know if you guys feel that also, is like there's something chemical in my brain that when I land on a new album that really does it for me, it's like it's a rush, it's a drug, you know. So it's I guess that's what keeps me going, is like you listen to you feel like you listen to 50 bad records and then you land on the one that really like blows you away. So that's, I guess, what keeps me going. Yeah.
So I have a question. First of all, great presentation. As a radio DJ, I feel like I'm getting a bit limited in my curation of playlists because, you know, I go to the same sources looking for certain artists. I keep getting like the same emails from different labels or different PR people. And I feel like some scenes are very tight knit, you know, when like a band chooses which band to open or which band to go on tour with. They're all very like tight connected, but I feel like by concentrating on this, there's an entire world of music that's like kind of passing me by that I'm not even aware of somewhere else in the internet. So I guess how would you recommend expanding our musical view?
Yeah, I mean, like a website like NTS does a really good job in taking people by the hand and going like genre exploration. Like if you wanted to listen to ambient, you would click on ambient, and then at the click of a finger, you could be like, well, ambient electronic, ambient modern classical. Okay, modern classical. And then from there, you would land on someone that's exactly like you, but that's an uber specialist of that, right? So my advice would be lean on sometimes lean on the work of others, lean on another person like you who's super passionate about this, who's super passionate about 70s fusion Brazilian music, and then I do that a lot, because I don't know everything about everything, but I'm passionate about everything. So I kind of have to, before I get, like, for example, when I was saying folk is a good example for me, because I know that, like, I consider myself barely passing, like I haven't even passed my 101 class. Like I'm super basic, so I lean on others who are, I'll go on NTS and then I'll find who's like the person that does a monthly folk show that is in the lane of what I like. And then poof, all of a sudden I can go listen to the archives and I have like the last 10 shows to go to. And then I have like all this expertise and all this knowledge that I can kind of go into and pick and choose like a few songs. So I think DJs, and maybe I'm saying that because that's the world that I come from, but DJs and record store are an incredible source to lean on. Again, when I was saying that record store is an incredible source to lean on, because it's a finite, when you go into a record store, they generally have some sort of a specialty. Like the stores I was talking about, like Sounds of the Universe and Hard Wax, they each have their lane. So if you're looking for something that's in that lane, chances are what they chose to stock that week is probably worth your attention, right? I really like stores that don't have, like, for example, Hard Wax, I think they have 20 new releases a week. That to me feels like the right number of stuff to kind of dig into. That's the problem with these digital platforms, like, for example, my example with Boomcat was, it's a site that I really, really love. The write-ups are great. But since it's a digital platform, you kind of feel the sense of like, okay, yeah, there's like 100 times more than there is on stores that are physical stores, right? So yeah, I would say find DJs and find stores that concentrate on that, and chances are they're doing that same work that you're doing and being more focused than you. So yeah, but NTS as a starter, because usually when you say as a starter or an introduction, that means that you're going to be introduced to super basic, kind of like, hey, here's the Bob Dylan greatest hits or whatever. But NTS is not like that. NTS is like super precise and super. So if you go into ambient modern Japanese stuff, it'll bring you already to the most cutting edge version of that, right? So yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Sorry?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I have a small question, just to give you an opportunity to develop more your ideas, because you insist a lot on the human touch and the human aspect and how it can make a difference. And I was wondering if you see all the development in artificial intelligence, the advancements in artificial intelligence, as some sort of threat to that, because they're becoming increasingly good at imitating certain genre or certain artistic signatures, and eventually they can even develop so they say, so we read, develop their own artistic or personal signatures. I mean, right now it's probably advanced enough so we can ask an algorithm to say, now just design a mix in the style of Theo Parrish or somebody else we admire and like. And some people can be I mean, it can become difficult to make the difference between the original artist and the algorithm. So what do you think about that? I mean,
yeah, for sure. It's yeah, I guess there's two. The thing and the, I mean, I make a clear distinction between people who have an active relationship with music and people who have a passive relationship with music. And I'm not, and generally people who have a passive relationship with music, that's kind of like 80% of the population, right? That's the people that go in their car, leave the first station that's on because it's just there, and then they click on the first thing that they see on Spotify just because it's there, right? So I guess I'm answering your question. One of the challenges is, how do we reach these people, and how do we make it more, how do we give them something more, right? Or can we? I don't know, maybe I don't know, it's a question that I ask myself. Maybe we shouldn't, maybe we can't, maybe we need to focus on the 20% of people who have an active relationship with music and who kind of like seek out these things and are willing to go to a show, and maybe if it's a strange show, that's something that they're just willing to try it out. But how do we humanize the thing? I mean, for me, it's a principle. It's not, I don't have the solution. It's just something that every time that I do any sort of project, I try to keep it in mind, and I try to do it as best I can. I don't have the solution, but but for sure, the unfortunately, like the couple threats that are kind of like out of our control is just we live in the attention economy. There's too much content, and yeah, people kind of like generally think that algorithms, when it comes to content, when you ask those 80%, generally people think like algorithms do a pretty good job. And I'm not saying that they do the job of recommending one piece of music well. What I find that they don't do well is everything that goes with it, is everything, the experience that goes with it. So that's what I'm trying to keep to work on. But like, for example, when we're saying radio, compare the experience of listening to 10 songs on a playlist versus the same experience of listening to those same 10 songs, but with a host. For example, hey, you're listening to this is who you present yourself, and then you inject yourself a little bit in the story. Then it becomes such a better experience, and then you're really doing something that the algorithm can't compete with, which is why, kind of like when I was showing that silly example of me doing playlists with crickets, that's kind of like my frustration. That's kind of like, I do that as an opposition to, like, well, there's playlists about beats to chill to, beats to, to make a salad to, beats to, go to the gym with your friend. Really, there's every single mood playlist that you can think of. So I decided to do the opposite. I decided to do something silly and different, So I don't know when you would ever decide to put a cricket playlist, but if you ever want to listen to every known song in the history with crickets, then you have my playlist. By the way, if either of you have songs that have crickets, please send them to me. Anything else? Ask me anything.
Well, I have more questions if I guess this is a more personal one, or just for fun, just curious, but some people think that, like, or maybe you're a bit supernatural, so maybe you're like not human, but after like 20 years of playing, and sometimes we're not inspired. I think, DJs get tired too, and curators get tired. We need love also. We need caretaking, or whatever,
Yeah.
So sometimes when I like don't have any inspiration, I just go back to some music, or it pops back in my, like, accidentally or intentionally by the universe. You listen to something that first inspired you, and you're like, oh yeah, this is why I do this, like, so is there anything that maybe you can think of that you can share with us, some music that you use to get re-inspired?
there's a few styles of music specifically that always will put a smile on my face and always kind of like reset me. Like, you know, just British electronic music generally kind of does that for me, whether it's like, you know, jungle, UK garage, drum and bass, that kind of stuff will always kind of that's the music that I broken beat. That's the music that I started DJing with. And then, you know, music from my childhood is more like, you know, golden age, you know, classic rap and all the samples that go around with it. But I guess for DJs, it's a bit different. It's a bit different than radio, because when you go and DJ, you become like a performer of those records, right? You're there, and when I say you're a champion of those records, well, you're there as a spokesman of those records, because you're there in person playing those records. So sometimes gigs where you don't feel that love and you don't feel like people, I mean, I've done so many gigs where I feel like, man, I'm playing like 5 hours of like incredible shit, and then I'm looking at people and then like I don't see one person nodding their head. Like I'm like you like sometimes you feel like grabbing the mic and be like, does anyone here like music, or like you know? So that's a difficulty that the DJ has, that not maybe the radio show person has, because, you know, you're more in your space and you don't have necessarily that but yeah, I don't know, like I'm never short on, I face the okay, I'm going to be a bit silly, but I don't know if either of you are like Simpsons like pretty like nerd, like, yeah, okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this. I wanted to write a post about it, but so I've been thinking about, like, you know, when I was saying the challenges of like there's just too much music, and I never thought I would say this as a bad thing, but there's just too much. And the music these days, I think there's a lot wrong with the music industry and the music context, but the amount of good music is certainly not the problem. There's so much fucking good music, it's incredible, you know? So I've been thinking about how I feel as a music creator about how this good has turned into a bad. Is like, there's an episode in The Simpsons where Homer eats a forbidden donut and is sent to hell. I don't know if you know this episode, but basically the joke is he gets sent to hell, and you see on the door, he gets sent to this thing called the ironic punishments division or whatever. And then the devil or whatever, he ties him to a chair, and then he forces, so you like donuts, eh? And then he just forces him to eat all the donuts in the world. And that's his punishment. And I feel like sometimes that's how I feel about music. So it's like, oh yeah, you like music, huh? So like, and I feel like every week, no matter how passionate I am about getting to the end of the thing and having listened to, I never have closure. I never have like, okay, I feel content, and I feel like I've done, you know, the research. That I know it's silly to say, but that's something I struggle with for real. Like, it's something, because there's so much good shit that I would like to listen to from the past, but there's so much good stuff coming out every week that it's overwhelming. And I know, yeah, it sounds silly to say that it's a bad thing, but I really feel like it's tough. It's really, really tough. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Actually, I have a question. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for the it's fascinating talk, and it's really inspiring for me. And you mentioned earlier that you have another role as a music supervisor. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that experience is for you. Like, how did you get into music supervision in the first place? How you balance your like music supervision and your passion project, like how much time it takes you every week, for example?
Yeah, it's a great. I mean, it sounds like. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you would be good at that job too. But it sounds like the job I was made for, in the sense that, you know, you get paid to think of the right song for the right scene, right? So, I mean, basically how it works is whether it's advertising or TV or series, you basically work with a creative team, whether it's the filmmaker or the team behind the brand, sometimes both, and they basically brief you and they tell you this is the campaign, this is what we're trying to do, this is the storyboard, this is the audience, this is that. They give you everything, all the information that they can give you. And sometimes, more often than not, it's extremely vague. It's like something human, something something unique. And then from that, I kind of like dive in, and then I kind of like with a few rounds, sometimes I basically recommend, well, this is, and I think of the scene, and this is what I think. And then I'll send them a short list of 20 songs, and then they'll either get back to me or say, this is the one, right? So that's kind of like, in a nutshell, that's kind of what the job is. And then, you know, being in touch with artists and managers, and once they pick the song and negotiate the rights and all of that stuff. But it's something, like I said, I mean, it's something I would love to do for movies and series eventually. You know, advertising is, the difficulty of it is that, you know, for every 3 gigs that you get, one of them is great, one of them is okay, and one of them is terrible, and you know, is soul crushing. But that's the job, you know, and you really have to check your ego at the door and check your music taste at the door, because it's not about your music taste. It's not about it is in a little bit, but it's about what's good for the brief, what's good for the project, right? So you really have to listen to what do the filmmaker and the brand, what do they want, right? You can't, if they want something building and epic and human and all that stuff, you can't propose free jazz, you know, you can't propose a fusion Norwegian something, you know. But it's yeah, to be honest, I don't think it's a job I would have been good at when I was 25, because I was still too close to the subject. I was still like, you need to be able to detach yourself a little bit, which I'm sure is the same for everyone that juggles the reality of being an artist, like your own shit, and then working for someone else, right? Whether it's a studio musician, well, it's just a gig. You're just there to play something, or you're just there to be the engineer for someone else's thing. So, but yeah, I guess I've gotten pretty good at kind of like, you know, this is their time, and I'm bringing my expertise, but my ego is left at the door, because otherwise, you know, it's always the same. It's very often the same references and the same type of music that works for advertising, and it's not always that you know, the project is super fulfilling, you know. But yeah.
Sounds like it's kind of like a day job that help you to support your passion projects.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And like any day job, sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's just a job. But hopefully, I mean, you know, you learn great things. You learn like the ins and outs of how to negotiate clearance of a track, and things that will be useful for another project down the road, I'm sure, you know. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Actually, if I may, I want to share an idea, like inspiration I got, like idea I inspired by something you said earlier. If we have like 2-3 minutes.
Yes, yes.
So you mentioned that the limitation of like how people now discover music from a screen like this compared to your in like record store experience, where you're going to the record store and it's like a 3D experience, you know. And I was just thinking, like, isn't that going to be a good idea to make it like a virtual reality record store experience, where you go into a virtual record store and you go around, it's the same as like in the old days, and then you can click on the record and you go into that record. Maybe something like this already existed, but that just came to my mind. I was like, that would be cool.
Yeah, the only thing missing from that experience would be a virtual record clerk, basically. Yeah. You say, hey, welcome back, what's up, how are you, did you go see that show, Oh, how did you like that thing last time? Oh, you like this? Oh yeah, you like that? Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, you should really go and find this. You know, I'll share a music experience that is from my musical mentor in Montreal. And he's the funniest guy, but what I really took from him is, so what he would do is this DJ store that lasted from 87 to 2007 or something. It was called Inbeat. And so what he would do is for important people, like people who, like, you know, just were like worthy of his time or whatever, he would take some time and walk with them around the store and go in the bins and pick some records for them. And then, you know, it took like 5 minutes because he knew exactly their taste, and his vision of things was like, he knows what this person plays and he knows what they should be playing, you know. And it wasn't like so much of a power trip, but it was like, you need this, like you need this. And then, so what he would do after that is, like, we had this great like DJ kit in the store, because his view was, if you're going to be buying club records, you need to experience them in a kind of club environment before you go and play them in the club. So basically what he would do is he would take the pile and make them listen to you on the kit super loud with tons of client, and then you're kind of like sitting next to him and you're kind of like listening to the records that he's playing for you. And these records are like $20 each, so you can't buy everything, right? You need to curate what you're buying too, right? So and sometimes the phrase that he would always say that always used to make me crack up is like, he would play something for someone and then the person would be like, yeah, meh. So which is a legitimate thing to do, right? And then he would look at the person dead in the face, and he would be like, he would say it in French, he would say, "T'as rien compris," like you don't get it, like you like really, like you don't get it. Like and like in a super insulting way, but he didn't mean it like that. And that's how much he believed in that music, and that's how much he believed that you needed it, right? And I've always remembered that, and that's like a nice kind of a human touch, definitely to curation. Yeah. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the time, folks, and wondering if there are any final words or comments or questions we'd like to make before we close up. I know you're probably all hungry, but I know we could keep going for a while. This is so interesting. So just putting that out there, if people have, or Alexi, if you have any final words or...
No, maybe for whoever was here, I can send you, Francella, I can send you like a few show links so that, you know, if you want to read that book by that Swiss curator I was telling you about, Hans Ulrich Obrist, I can send you a few things that I think you would find inspiring, and my cricket playlist. Yeah.
Amazing. So that's a yes, I'm seeing in the chat. Alexi, we are so privileged to have spent this time with you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with all of us here today and your experiences. And it was no, come on, it's really great, and obviously everybody here really appreciated, everything you had to share with us. So thank you. Silent golf claps all around.
Yeah, I hope we do this again. Yeah.
Sorry.
I said I hope we do this again.
Yeah. Okay.
Someday.
I'm sorry.
Tomorrow.
Looks good on my... Okay, I got distracted with something, but just wanted to thank everybody once again for joining us here today. Hopefully we'll be able to welcome you into Fourth Space proper sometime very, very soon to continue our hybrid event production, where we have people joining via Zoom, people doing stuff in the space, sitting around the table together and enjoying each other's company in this way. So we hope to work with Alexi again in the future, and of course with CJLO and Francella. Thank you so much for bringing this to us, this project. Great organization. Thank you for spearheading it. And Francella, did you want to plug some of the upcoming events or workshops before we close up?
Sure, absolutely. So Saturday, we do have a workshop at noon that we'll be holding with Sun Noor and the Center for Oral History and Digital Storytelling at Concordia University. It's about how to create a profound audio experience. So you have the basics already down, you know how to interview, you know how to collect field recordings, but how do you really make something mesmerizing that will last with listening audience? So that's what Sun Noor is going to go over on Saturday. On Monday, we'll be inviting Vish Khanna from the Creative Control podcast, and he'll talk to you about how to find and grow and build an audience. So you have a radio show or a podcast, or maybe you're thinking about starting one, but you definitely want to make sure that it reaches the right people. So Vish is going to go over that Monday at 7 p.m. And we have more workshops. You can find more information about that by going to CJLO's social media pages. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also go to cjlo.com. So yeah, thank you so much once again. This was amazing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. So we'll close the Zoom now. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good lunch.